Good morning, children. Today we'll continue with the lesson, The Sorcerer's Apprentice. It is on page 69 of your English literature textbooks, okay? Now, yesterday we did page 69. Today we are going to do page 71, okay? It's a follow-up of yesterday. Okay, so what happened in the story yesterday? We learned how the villagers lost all their crops and they thought it was magic. Okay, and James, a young boy, said that he would find out who had taken the crops, and he meets a very tall person with long beard, long sparkling coat, tall hat and a raven perched on his arm, and he asks him for work in exchange for food. Okay? And this sorcerer says, "Follow me." So, let's continue. "Work, he said. "I do need someone to help me. Follow me." The raven flew to James and perched on his shoulder. So the raven, which was perched on the arm of the sorcerer, flew to James and perched on his shoulder. Perched means sat. The sorcerer led James into the castle. As they passed along the dark corridors, James saw some doors ajar. So they went to the castle and he took James along a long dark corridor. And as James looked, there were so many rooms along the corridor and the doors were ajar, were open, slightly open. Some rooms were filled with treasures and others were full of fruits and vegetables. "These must be from our fields," gasped James. So he couldn't speak in a loud voice. Okay, so he said, "These must be from our fields." "Yes, if you can find out his secrets, you can save me and your people," said the raven. So even the raven could talk. The sorcerer led James into a large hall and said, "Stir the mixtures in these large pots and make sure the biggest pot is full at all times." So the sorcerer gave James some work to do. So what was the work he made James do? He asked James to stir the pots, the mixtures in the large pots, and the biggest pot should be full at all times. So James stirred and carried buckets of water all day long and filled the big pot. One day, James tried to leave. So James got tired of stirring the pots and carrying buckets of water and doing the work every day. Okay, so he tried to leave, but his way was blocked. So he couldn't leave because there was magic all around and he couldn't leave the castle. So he thought to himself, "If I learn the sorcerer's magic spells," said James to himself, "I can leave the castle." But when James was near, the sorcerer said the spells softly. So James thought, if I learn the spells myself, then I can say the spells and the magic will go away and I can leave the castle. But the sorcerer wouldn't say the spells loudly when James was near because he did not want James to learn the spells. One day, James was so tired that he fell asleep behind some large pots in the hall. So James was so tired carrying buckets of water and filling the pots and stirring the mixtures that he fell asleep behind some large pots. The sorcerer did not see him. Suddenly there was a crash and James woke up. So the sorcerer came into the large hall and he did not see James. Where was James? He was behind some pots sleeping. And The sorcerer, there was a large crash. Now what made that crash? Let's find out. The sorcerer had dropped a jar to the floor and James woke up. Then James heard him use a magic spell. James was most surprised to see a broom fly through the air. The broom began to sweep up the broken bits of the jar. So James woke up with the crash, and then when the sorcerer saw that James was not there, he used his magic spell loudly and he called for a broom, and the broom came flying through the air and started sweeping, okay, the bits and pieces of the jar which had fallen to the ground. So James heard the spell. The next day, when the sorcerer was out, James repeated the magic spell and ordered the broom to fetch water. The broom did that, but it did not stop. Soon the large pot was full and there was water all over the floor. James did not know how to stop it. So James knew how to get the broom to do the work, but he did not know how to stop the broom, okay? So the broom kept on bringing water and pouring it into the pot and pouring, and there was water all over the place. And James did not know how to stop the broom. When the sorcerer returned, he screamed, "Beat him!" And the broom began to beat James. But James had heard the magic words, so he told the broom to stop. So, as the sorcerer came into the room and he saw water all over the place, he used the magic spell to stop the broom. So James heard that also. And then he told the magic broom to beat James. Okay, so the magic broom started to beat James. But James knew how to make the broom stop. So he screamed the words and the broom stopped beating him. So what happened after this? James said, "Now I know your magic spells. I shall leave the castle." So the sorcerer said the magic words and turned into a huge bear. So the sorcerer was very angry now and he started using his magic spells in a loud voice and he turned into a bear. The bear was going to attack James and he was frightened. Then James repeated the magic words and thought about a snake. In a flash, James turned into a snake. Now he could attack the bear. So he hissed and moved close to the bear. So James also started using the magic spells and he thought of a snake and he turned himself into a snake. And as the bear came towards James, James had turned into a snake and he hissed and moved close to the bear. So when the snake came near, the bear turned into an eagle and swooped down and flew down straight towards the snake. On the snake, then James turned himself into a cat and attacked the eagle. This battle went on for some time, and all this while, what did the raven do? The raven sat high up on the top of a window and watched. So the raven did not take part in the fight. He just watched James and the sorcerer fighting, changing into different animals and fighting. The cat chased the eagle and tore some of its feathers. The eagle flew out of the window. James then turned himself back into a boy. "Quick," he said to the raven, "let's get out of here." After that, James helped the village people and they never had any trouble from the sorcerer again. So why do you think the sorcerer did not come back to the village? I think it's because he knew that James knew some of the spells and James could turn into an animal and attack him. So they did not have any trouble from the sorcerer again. I hope you enjoyed the story, children. Please read the chapter, okay? And learn the difficult words. In the next lesson, we will do the difficult words. Okay, thank you.